It's funny because the Western Western government often talk about how they need to protect of speech of freedom, but when the speech of freedom favors the other side, they want to shut it down immediately. You can have speech of freedom of speech, as long as you speak in support of U.S. State Department policies, right? If you speak for the enemy, right, because now Russia has been designated as an official enemy. If you have pro-Russian views, you get shut down, and that's very sad. That's very sad. ASB Military, which is a Twitter account that shares a lot of information on the war, and they're the one that share a lot of the information from the Russian side of the war, because the Western media normally shares the Ukrainian side of the war. And ASB Military has been pulled up, has been shut down from Twitter right after the posted video. The video shows that Ukrainian civilians, they came out to stop the Ukrainian military from putting artilleries in their neighborhood, because they told them, look, if you put your artillery here near our schools and hospitals, the Russian artillery is going to respond and destroy our neighborhood. Please move your artillery elsewhere, right? And that is a very revealing video. As soon as ASB, I think few hours after the ASB military account posted that video, they got shut down. I mean, it's almost like they do not want to see the other side of the war. And it's not surprising, because Twitter actually works hand in hand with the Atlantic Council back in the 2018 to fight so-called Russian disinformation, because at that time, U.S. media is pushing the line that Russia somehow influenced the U.S. election, right, by disinformation on social media like Twitter and Facebook. So all these social media giants like Facebook and Twitter, they work with Atlantic Council. Atlantic Council is just basically an arm of NATO. They tell Twitter what to censor, which account to shut down. And now after the war started, we have seen, they got into action. ASB military got shut down. That's one of the prominent ones. There's a couple others I can't remember from the top of my head right now, but ASB military was one of the prominent one, because they have a lot of followers, and one of the very popular YouTube channel creator about military affairs. The content creator lived in I think he lived in Latvia, right, which is a NATO country, but his content has been pro-Russia. So he recently was arrested because European Union has brought charge against him for possible treason, for just posting information from the Russian side. I mean, it's quite mind-boggling, the level of censorship that's being placed right now on individuals. That the labeling of journalists and news outlet on Twitter. Now if you now they put this label on people, Chinese journalists, Russian journalists, on Russian state affiliate media, Chinese state affiliated media. And one of my friend Andy, he works at the Shanghai Daily, and he became the first foreigner. He's from New Zealand. He became the first foreigner on Twitter to get the Chinese state media label on Twitter. And when you get that label, what that means, a lot of times it means they shadow ban you on Twitter. You cannot, if you don't follow them already, if you're trying to search on Twitter, their names do not automatically show up. Like, for example, People's Daily. This is a very important newspaper, right? They're representing China's voice. If you go to Twitter, if you don't already follow People's Daily, if you search for People's Daily, it doesn't get automatically populated in the search results. I tried that. I tried. I couldn't find them. And that is quite. I mean, this is kind of very sneaky ways. at censorship. It's not like they're not outright banning people's daily. They just make sure you don't see it. You don't see their content. You try to search, they don't show up. And it's also interesting what search result do show up. There was very recently there was a news of supposedly a Chinese person who volunteered to fight for the Ukrainian army. Right. When I hear that news, I was very skeptical. So I went on Google to search the news. I put in his name, and the result came up. The first result that came up is from RFA, Radio Free Asia, which is a well-known it's a well-known media outlet created by the former head of CIA, because there was a clip of the former head of CIA who said RFA is doing the things that we CIA used to do. I mean, they're just basically like a CIA affiliated media. So these people are allowed to spread their information or disinformation, right? And they got the number one Google search result. They censor the news they don't like, and they push you their own version of propaganda, to the top of the search result list. This is how things are done right now in US, very unfortunately. They suspended the official spokesperson for Iran. This was back when US and Iran are fighting over the nuclear deal. So yeah, this is not new. This US has done this before, but I think this time is more. It's more. it's more blatant. It's now people are more paying attention, and they're doing this in front of everybody. Like they let you know that what kind of voice are acceptable, what kind of narrative is acceptable, what kind is not. I mean, it's quite amazing. Google, Facebook, what is the other one? Google, Facebook, Apple, right? They all work, and on Twitter as well. They all work hand in glove with U.S. government. All of them would hand over their user data to U.S. government when the U.S. government asks. And the example I already talked about earlier about Twitter and Facebook work with Atlantic Council to censor information. Now, this is done in a way that, okay, they can pretend Atlantic Council is not U.S. government, but U.S. government, Atlantic Council is funded by the U.S. government. It may not claim to be official part of U.S. government, but it might as well be, right? So this is kind of thing that we're seeing right now. They have and also ASPI. Twitter is working with ASPI, which is an Australian think tank, Australian Strategic ASPI. This ASPI Australian think tank, it's if you look at their funding, the majority of their funding actually don't even come from Australian government. It comes from the United States State Department. It comes from U.S. weapon manufacturers like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, right? So they're not a neutral party. In fact, ASPI received a nice kickback from the Australian government for when Australia purchased anti-ship missiles from United States, ostensibly for the purpose against China. And so ASPI received a very nice finder's fee for that. And so ASPI is the one that also working with Twitter to censor any kind of information they consider like be pro-Chinese government or pro-Russia, right? See, so these social media platforms are not neutral at all. I mean, they are now actively part of the U.S. government policy by extension. It's so yeah. So I mean, before this wasn't apparent, but now it's very obvious. Even in 2009, we saw U.S. openly talking about using social media like Twitter and Facebook to destabilize Iran during the so-called Green Revolution, one of the color revolutions. At that time, Facebook and Twitter play a huge role to foment unrest in Iran, right? In US, the public opinion is actually divided between the two parties, right? So most of people in US, especially the people on the conservative side, they already distrust the mainstream media because they feel the mainstream media is biased toward, say, Democrats, for example. But the problem is in US, even though people can call out bullshit in their own domestic media when they're reporting about US, because they know about US. The US, it's harder for the media to create a straight out lie, because everybody is familiar with US already. But when US media say is reporting about China, because there's so much ignorance about China, because nobody knows anything about China, so they still tend to believe the same media which they would distrust when they report about US. It's very odd phenomena. I mean, even a lot of the US so-called US leftists, they question the US mainstream media reporting on Cuba, on Venezuela, and all the other socialist countries in Latin America, because they're more familiar with Latin America. Cuba, Venezuela is relatively close. A lot of people in US speak Spanish. They would realize, okay, all these US report on Cuba and Venezuela is bullshit. But when US media create some outrageous lies about China, they still tend to believe it because they themselves don't know anything about China. Only information they have about China is from these same US media outlets. So it's very, very frustrating for me. But people are gradually waking up, because that's why I think that is also why now I have 96,000 followers on Twitter, and a lot of people are coming to me to ask me, okay, what is really going on? Like, people, if there's a news item, New York Times is pushing about China, they will come ask me, hey, have you seen this article? Is this really true? I think the skepticism is starting to show up, because the level of propaganda and censorship have gotten to the point that people are finally start to question the mainstream narrative in the world, in the kind of the world events.